The dog was drowning in the swamp and howling for help. Just look who came to her rescue. In the heart of Georgia's mysterious Okefenokee swamp, the night air felt thick as velvet, laced with the unsettling sounds of distant wildlife. A frantic howl pierced the moonlit silence, sending shivers down spines and summoning ancient echoes from the waterlogged forest floor. A dog, chest deep in murky water, was fighting desperately to stay afloat, every fading bark a plea for salvation. What unimaginable force had brought her to this perilous place? And more importantly, who would risk it all to come to her rescue, prepared to be immersed in a story of courage, connection, and the powerful bond that can form between strangers? The sun had long since dipped below the spindly cypress trees, leaving the Okefenokee swamp draped in the kind of twilight that blurred the edges of shapes and saturated the air with moody silhouettes. On certain nights, the swamp could seem downright enchanting, like a hidden realm of living shadows. But for anyone lost or ensnared within its labyrinthine channels, the Okefenokee could become a haunting prison of strange creatures, bottomless muck, and watery graves. At this hour, the stillness of the swamp was impressive. Crickets and frogs sang their evening chorus, and somewhere in the distance, an alligator lurked with soundless menace. While the rest of the world prepared for bed, the swamp held on to its secrets. Thickets of cypress knees jutted from the water like ancient totems, and tangles of Spanish moss hung overhead, forming curtains that swayed gently in the humid breeze. And in that slow, humid hush, a lone dog struggled in the darkness. Her name would later be known to the world as Daisy, but in that desperate moment, she was just an unnamed creature fighting against the cold drag of swamp water around her body. Filthy brown foam clung to her fur, her face spattered with mud and speckled with water droplets that caught the moonlight like shards of shattered glass. Daisy's entire body quivered with exhaustion. She clawed at the water's surface, trying to keep her snout above the creeping tide of quicksand like muck. She had once been a vibrant young retriever, mixed with sunshine in her eyes and a wagging tail that rarely stopped. Yet tonight, all her effervescence was drowned out by fear. Each time she tried to find a foothold, her paws sank deeper, pulling her closer to a watery doom. She let out a howl, an ear-splitting, gut-wrenching sound that seemed to carry her life force up into the vast, star-pocked sky. Her voice trembled, more sob than bark, teetering on the edge between hope and despair. It was not just an animal cry. It was the universal language of desperation. Unbeknownst to Daisy, someone heard her. Noah Sullivan was in his mid-30s, a man shaped by the same unpredictability that shaped the Okefenokee swamp. Born and raised in Georgia, he had grown up on stories of the swamp's ghosts and legends. Some said lost spirits of Civil War deserters haunted the area, while others spoke of giant reptiles lurking in the deep. Noah dismissed most tales as exaggerated or fictional, though he would never discount the swamp's powerful hold on local imaginations. When he was a child, Noah would visit the outer edges of the Okefenokee with his father, a devoted naturalist who taught him to love and respect all creatures. Those excursions were filled with wonder, fishing at dawn, watching birds from a rickety canoe, tracking footprints in the soft black mud. But when Noah was 15, his father drowned during a flash flood in a nearby river, a tragedy that left behind a scar on his life that never fully healed. He had retreated from nature then, turning inward. Over the years, he found respite in the swirl of city life, burying himself in his work as a freelance photographer for a major magazine. The constant travels and snapping shutters offered an escape from real, painful memories. He even had an offer to travel to Africa to photograph big game migrations, a dream job for any wildlife photographer. But something stopped him from going. Something like a tether kept pulling him back to his father's memory. So he stayed in Georgia, taking smaller gigs, photographing weddings, local festivals, and an occasional wildlife piece whenever he felt a hint of curiosity stir in him again. On this particular night, Noah found himself near the Okefenokee Swamp. He had recently accepted a short assignment for a conservation group wanting photos of rare swamp flora and fauna under moonlight. The job was to capture the luminous effect of the moon on the cypress trees and water, but his real motive was to face the ghosts of his past, which had always lurked somewhere beyond the moss-laden trees. He set up his camera near a drier patch of ground. The hush of the swamp felt both familiar and alien. He inhaled deeply, letting the warm, humid air fill his lungs, stirring hazy childhood memories. He recalled the laughter of his father, the guiding hand pointing out animal tracks. A pang of grief reverberated through him, but also a strange sense of calm. That was when he heard Daisy's howl. A ripple of adrenaline shot through him. He fumbled to place his camera gently on the ground, the lens pointed away from the soggy earth. The howling continued, a strangled, desperate cry that rose in abrupt spikes. Noah immediately grabbed a flashlight from his pack, flipping the switch to cast a thin, white beam through the gloom. He never expected his first re-entry into the swamp's depths to be a rescue mission. But when he heard that frantic bark, something ancient within him answered the call, like all the times he and his father had saved small creatures or nursed injured birds. He sprinted off, following the echoes. Each new wail drew him closer to the watery labyrinth. The moment Noah spotted Daisy, half submerged in a patch of thick, clinging mud, it was both horrifying and galvanizing. Even in the minimal light, he could see her wide, panicked eyes and flailing front paws. Noah's heart lurched. He called out to her over the steady hum of the swamp insect. "Hey there, girl. Hang on, I'm coming." He felt foolish talking to an animal as if she could understand every word, but he believed in the power of a soothing voice. She needed hope. Daisy's amber eyes glimmered. There was something undeniably human in them, an urgent plea for help. She let out a muted whimper that resonated with the heartbreak in Noah's soul. Already, he could see her arms and torso caked in swamp debris. Her fur was weighed down with sludge and water. Every breath she drew was a fight. Carefully, Noah assessed his surroundings. He stepped forward, and the earth immediately threatened to swallow his boots. He realized with a sinking feeling that the patch of ground surrounding the dog was essentially a pit of quicksand, like muck. If he dove in hastily, he might get trapped as well. "All right," Noah murmured to himself. "Think it through." With a trembling hand, he reached into his pack for a coil of rope. He used to secure camera equipment. Then, tying one end around the trunk of a narrow cypress that looked sturdy enough, he wrapped the other end around his waist. Progress was painfully slow as he inched forward, testing each step. Twice, he nearly lost his footing, feeling the mud tug at his calves with an almost hungry pull. Daisy's cries were weakening, becoming raspy as her energy waned. The waterline rose around her muzzle, and with each labored exhale, she sank deeper. "Almost there," Noah said, voice tight with dread. Sweat formed at his temples, beads of it rolled down his cheeks. He planted one foot on a small, slightly raised mound, which gave him enough leverage to reach out to the dog. She was only a foot away from his grasp, but it felt like miles. In a final, desperate move, Noah lunged forward, ignoring the suction force that tried to claim him. He grasped Daisy by the scruff of her neck and tugged upward, simultaneously leaning back to distribute his weight away from the sludge. She yelped in surprise and alarm, but then allowed him to lift her free from the mire. Both man and dog sprawled backward into the marginally firmer ground. In the scramble, Daisy clawed at his arm, leaving shallow scratches, but Noah scarcely noticed. He could feel her heart pounding through her wet fur. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. Gently, Noah stroked her muddy head. "You're safe now," he whispered. Her trembling subsided only slightly, but her eyes held a silent gratitude that transcended any spoken language. If Noah had any doubts about fate or destiny, they vanished in that moment. He was meant to be there for her. When Daisy finally emerged from the swamp's clutches, every part of her seemed soaked in grime. Clumps of mud and tangled vegetation clung to her fur, but with each shudder of her body, more debris slipped off. She coughed, sputtering muddy water. Noah knew the dog needed medical attention, or at least proper washing and rest. He removed his jacket and wrapped it around Daisy's trembling frame. The temperature at night could drop unexpectedly, and after a near-drowning experience, the last thing she needed was a chill. "Hey, let's get you to my truck," he said softly, as though coaxing an old friend. He had left his vehicle, a dusty Toyota Tacoma, parked on a narrow access road near the swamp's edge. Even though Daisy seemed drained, she managed a few wobbly steps, leaning on Noah's leg for support. Each slip and stumble reminded him of how close she had been to death. The dog was skinny too, ribs faintly visible through her wet, matted coat, which hinted she might have been astray for some time. They trudged slowly, guided by moonlight, a flashlight, and Noah's determination. He carried Daisy part of the way when her legs gave out, ignoring how his own muscles screamed in protest. By the time they reached the truck, his chest heaved from exertion and sweat glistened on his brow. Noah placed Daisy gently on the passenger seat, covering the vinyl cushion with an old blanket. She stared up at him, wide-eyed, as he rummaged through the glove compartment for tissues or a rag to wipe her face. Even though her whimpers had subdued, her entire body still trembled and her breathing came in shallow bursts. "It's okay," Noah cooed as he patted her damp fur. "We'll get you somewhere safe." He paused, glancing back at the swamp, that silent labyrinth of black water and hanging moss. A mix of relief and unease churned in his gut. The swamp was still teeming with unknown dangers, but for now the dog was out of it. As Noah slid behind the steering wheel, he realized he had, in some profound way, also saved a part of himself from sinking further into a different kind of darkness. Every turn of the truck's engine, every flicker of the headlights cutting through the gloom, felt like a small act of liberation. Noah decided to drive home, which was a modest cabin about 20 miles away on the outskirts of a small Georgian town. The drive felt longer than usual, every minute punctuated by Daisy's soft, trembling breaths. The star-studded sky offered little solace, but the hum of the engine soothed the raw edges of Noah's nerves. Upon arrival, he carried Daisy into his living room. She was too weak to protest. The cabin smelled of pine and old wood, and the furniture was well worn but inviting. Noah carefully placed her on a folded comforter near the warm glow of a fireplace he quickly kindled. Unsure of her temperament or any injuries, he grabbed a bowl of warm water, a soft sponge, and some mild soap from his bathroom. Gently, he started to clean the mud off her fur. Throughout the process, Daisy winced a few times, especially when he touched her raw paws, but she never snarled or snapped at him. Instead, she peered at him with those soulful amber eyes, as though her gratitude ran deeper than any words could express. Afterward, he wrapped her in a fluffy towel, drying her gently. He examined her for cuts or bruises, finding several superficial scrapes, but nothing too severe. Still, she was malnourished and traumatized. From a dusty corner cupboard, Noah retrieved a can of chicken soup and a half-finished bag of kibble leftovers from his sister's dog's visit months ago. He heated the soup, let it cool a bit, then mixed it with the kibble in a bowl, which he set down in front of Daisy. Her eyes brightened at the scent, and though her exhaustion weighed heavily, hunger won out. She lapped at the meal, each bite a testament to her will to keep living. Noah, watching her eat, felt an odd stirring in his chest. A sense of duty, yes, but also a sense of kinship. He recognized a fragile soul clinging to life. He recalled how, after losing his father, he had felt lost and adrift, not unlike Daisy in the swamp. Perhaps, by saving her, he could also save himself from that persistent undertow of sorrow. Night folded over the cabin, and the crackle of the fireplace was their only companion. At some point, Daisy fell asleep, curled up against the comforter, safe from the watery nightmare. Noah stayed awake a while longer, seated on the floor beside her. Absently, he stroked the damp fur behind her ears, letting the steady rhythm of her breathing reassure him. He felt that old memory of his father drift through his mind like a fragment of a dream. In the darkness, lit only by the soft glow of embers, Noah whispered, "I hope I did you proud, Dad." And for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of peace. When dawn broke, the cabin was awash in soft golden light that penetrated the lace curtains. Noah awoke to a gentle tug on his sleeve. Daisy was awake, her head rested on his forearm, eyes pleading but calmer. The events of the night before momentarily rushed back, and he sat up with a start, muscles protesting from having slept on the floor. "Morning, girl," he said, his voice still groggy. Daisy's tail thumped the floor twice, tentative but hopeful. She was far from energetic, but some spark of life had returned, shining through the exhaustion and hunger. Noah quickly checked her vitals well, as much as one could without proper veterinary training. She seemed stable, though still shaky on her feet when she tried to stand. He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her back down. "Rest. You've earned it." The next logical step was to get Daisy to a vet. It wasn't just about any physical injuries. The near-drowning experience could lead to pneumonia or other complications. Unfortunately, the nearest veterinarian's office was 30 miles away, in the small town of Waycross. Noah glanced at the clock, 7 a.m., a Sunday. The vet's office might be closed, but there was an emergency clinic even further out. Before he made any moves, he decided to give Daisy a bit more time to recover from the ordeal. He prepared a hearty breakfast for both of them, scrambled eggs for him, a mixture of leftover soup broth and kibble for her. She was ravenous, finishing every last morsel. He hadn't even realized he was on edge until he saw Daisy's strength returning. The relief coursed through him like a wave of warmth. Unconsciously, he let out a sigh. Maybe he'd always needed a reason to come back to the Okefenokee, to confront the spectre of his father's death. The dog's sudden entrance into his life felt destined. After finishing the meal, he phoned the emergency vet to describe Daisy's condition. Then, cradling her in his arms again, he carried her out to the truck. The morning sun illuminated her honey-brown fur, still matted in places. She peered out the window as they drove off, curiosity seeming to replace dread. Every mile they traveled felt like a small step away from the darkness of the swamp. The parking lot of the emergency vet clinic was nearly empty. A large sign read, "Waycross Animal Hospital," a real place that served not just the town but all surrounding rural areas, including occasional wildlife emergencies from the Okefenokee. Inside, the walls were a calming shade of pastel green, and the reception desk displayed a variety of pet food brands and adoption flyers. A nurse with kind eyes escorted them into a small examination room. Bright overhead lights glinted off steel instruments. The veterinarian, Dr. Moreno, was a petite woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a warm smile that spoke of decades of caring for animals. "So you found her in the swamp, Doctor?" Moreno asked, voice gentle yet firm. Daisy lay on the exam table, looking around with anxious eyes. You saved her life, you know. Noah nodded, cheeks flushing. She was in bad shape. I had to pull her out of a mud patch. I, just happened to be there. Well, Dr. Moreno continued, using a stethoscope to listen to Daisy's heart and lungs. You arrived at exactly the right time. Dogs rarely survive that kind of swamp entrapment. She's underweight and has some superficial cuts. I'm going to check for fluid in her lungs to rule out aspiration pneumonia. Daisy endured the tests with surprising calm. As Dr. Moreno administered some antibiotic and vitamin shots, Daisy whimpered softly but didn't struggle. Noah stayed by her side, scratching her ear and whispering words of reassurance. All looks fairly good, considering, Dr. Moreno finally said, after noting Daisy's stats on a clipboard. She's a brave one. A few days of rest and a full course of medication, and she should recover nicely. She's very lucky to have stumbled across you. Noah let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. So, what do we do next? That depends, Dr. Moreno replied, meeting his gaze. Are you planning to keep her? Or do you want us to contact the local shelters? Noah blinked. Before last night, he had never considered owning a dog. His lifestyle was unpredictable travels for photography gigs and a cabin that sometimes felt too empty, even for himself. But the thought of Daisy in a crowded shelter behind cold metal bars made his stomach twist. I'll keep her, he said, surprising even himself. That is, if she wants to stay. I found her. Feels right. Dr. Moreno offered a bright smile. I think she'd be more than happy with you. Let me get you some paperwork and the medications she'll need. The nurse stepped back in with a prescription and a small invoice. Noah almost laughed with relief when he realized the cost was far less than he feared. He remembered seeing adoption drives that charged more, yet here he was, paying a modest bill to keep a life he had saved. Fate could be strangely poetic. As he guided Daisy out the door, she pressed her muzzle against his leg. In that subtle gesture, he felt their bond deepen. Neither of them knew what lay ahead, but they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. Back at the cabin, Noah set up a temporary dog bed in the living room, close to the fireplace. Daisy explored her new surroundings, sniffing furniture and corners with cautious curiosity. She sneezed a few times, wrinkling her nose at the dust bunnies lurking under the couch. Noah realized he had let housekeeping slide in recent months, lost in the swirl of his own mind. He spent the afternoon tidying up, sweeping away layers of dust, opening windows to let fresh air in. Daisy followed him from room to room, occasionally wagging her tail. If he paused too long in one spot, she would nudge him gently, as though to say, "Keep going. I'm right here with you." Inside the spare bedroom, which had once been his father's study, Noah found old photograph snapshots of him as a boy, perched beside his dad on a small wooden boat. They were smiling, fishing rods in hand, the swamp in the background. A swirl of emotions hit him, regret for the lost years, sorrow at the fleeting nature of life, and a growing sense of hope that perhaps new memories could mend old wounds. Daisy, as if sensing his mood, nosed against his calf. He squatted down to her level, letting her place a paw on his knee. In that moment, he knew he was no longer alone in his journey. However battered their souls, they had found each other in one of the darkest places imaginable. He set the photo aside, mentally promising to frame it and display it somewhere in the cabin. Then, with Daisy watching, he resumed cleaning, the simple tasks giving him a sense of purpose. By late afternoon, the cabin felt lighter, not just physically but emotionally, as if a fresh breeze had swept away some old, stagnant energy. When night fell, he took Daisy outside for a short walk around the property. The air was sweet with the scent of pine and damp earth. She sniffed at every twig and leaf, tail swishing. Noah felt a small pang of joy at her renewed interest in life. Less than 24 hours earlier, she had been on the brink of drowning. Now she was exploring the world, step by step. Later that evening, as Daisy dozed by the fireplace, Noah sank into the old recliner. The flames danced, casting a gentle glow that flickered across the wooden walls. Usually, nights in the cabin were lonely, haunted by echoes of the past, but tonight, the soft breathing of another living being made all the difference. He allowed his eyes to close, drifting into a light sleep. And then came the dream, vivid, almost cinematic. He was a boy again, paddling a canoe beside his father in the Okefenokee. The water glimmered like black glass, reflecting the towering cypress trees and the draping Spanish moss overhead. Frogs croaked, and an unseen heron let out a cry. His father spoke, words echoing in the dream. "Always respect the swamp, Noah. It has secrets, but it also has beauty." Then the dream twisted. Thick vines, like living tentacles, rose from the water, threatening to capsize the canoe. Noah gasped, trying to reach for his father, who sat at the other end. But the boat lurched, tipping into the murky depths. He felt water close over his head, the swamp swallowing him whole. Terrified, he opened his mouth to scream, and water flooded in. But just when he thought he was doomed, a dog barked. Through the watery haze, Daisy appeared, swimming toward him, her fur glimmering like sunlight. She pulled him up, saving him from suffocation. He woke with a start, chest heaving. The room was dark, except for the dying embers in the fireplace. Daisy's gaze rested on him. It felt like she knew exactly what had transpired in his dream. Slowly she padded over, settled at his feet, and rested her head on his knee. Her eyes were calm, filled with a silent warmth. In that moment, Noah realized something crucial. Daisy might have needed him to save her, but in a deeper, more spiritual sense, she was saving him too. The next few days passed in a blur of adjustment. Daisy's strength returned rapidly with consistent meals, medication, and rest. Her fur took on a glossy sheen, revealing a hidden beauty beneath the grime that once clung to her. Noah discovered she had a sweet, gentle temperament, a dog eager to please and quick to learn. She also had a quirk. Whenever she sensed him tensing up or slipping into a somber reflection, she would lick his hand or lean against him as if to tether him to the present moment. During that time, Noah purchased proper dog supplies, an actual bed, treats, a leash, toys, and a big bag of high-quality dog food. He joked to Daisy about needing a second job just to keep up with her appetite. At the local pet store, a bright poster advertising a charity for abandoned animals caught his eye. The store was part of a network supporting shelters, which reminded Noah that Daisy might have come from such a place, or perhaps she was born a stray. Her exact origins remained a mystery. That sense of unknown only deepened his empathy for her. Whatever had led her to the swamp, it hadn't been kindness or safety. Oddly enough, the demands of life called Noah back to the Okefenokee sooner than expected. The conservation group he'd been working with wanted more shots at dawn expedition, showcasing sunrise over the cypress canopies and capturing the elusive egrets in flight. Part of Noah dreaded returning, but another part felt a strange pull. After all, the swamp had brought Daisy into his life. One crisp morning, he loaded his camera gear into the truck. Daisy watched curiously from the passenger seat. "You're coming with me," Noah told her, buckling her into a specially purchased dog seat belt harness for safety. "We'll keep our distance from the dangerous spots, okay?" She tilted her head, as if comprehending the gist of his words. During the ride, the morning sun painted the horizon in shades of pink and orange, a kaleidoscope of color heralding a new day. By the time they reached the swamp's edge, a lazy fog rolled over the glassy water, adding a layer of surreal beauty to the scene. In the hush of dawn, Noah found the vantage points that would best capture nature's waking moments. Carefully, he set up his tripod, Daisy stuck close, her stance cautious, as if she remembered all too well the swamp's dark side. Occasionally, she would whine softly, especially when a breeze rustled the tall reeds, making them sway like ghostly silhouettes. Noah shot photo after photo herons perched on waterlogged stumps, the sun's first rays slicing through the fog, the reflective tapestry of the water that mirrored the blazing sky. Each click of the shutter felt like a prayer of gratitude, a testament to resilience. Here he was, in a place that once represented terror and sorrow, reclaiming it with fresh purpose. He also snapped a few pictures of Daisy, capturing her soulful face against the background of cypress trees. She gazed back at him, ears slightly perked, as if to say, "It's okay, we're together now." In those images, something in her eyes, an unwavering loyalty, leaped from the lens. When the shoot ended, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced his fears and come away with not just photographs, but a renewed understanding of life. The swamp, once a realm of nightmares, now felt more balanced. Yes, it held danger, but it also held redemption, beauty, and the unstoppable force of survival mirrored in Daisy's story. That evening, back in the cabin, as Daisy slept and Noah reviewed the day's photographs on his laptop, a chill breeze threaded through the open window. He glanced up to see the moon, nearly full, hanging low and luminescent. A dog barking in the distance echoed across the stillness, and Daisy stirred. Then a new sound broke the quiet, a steady scratching at the door. Noah's heart quickened. It was too persistent to be the wind or a tree branch. Daisy's ears perked, and a low growl rumbled in her throat. Noah stood, crossing the living room. When he opened the door, half expecting a stray cat or a raccoon, he was startled to see a wiry man in ragged clothes, smelling faintly of alcohol. His eyes were bloodshot, and his posture wobbled. "You got any food, mister?" The man slurred, swaying in the dim porchlight. "I'm hungry. Been walking all day." A wave of unease crashed over Noah. He glanced around, noticing no vehicle. The nearest road was a mile away. "Why are you here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's private property." The man staggered forward, forcing Noah to step back. Daisy, from inside, barked sharply, hackles raised. The man peered around Noah, eyes narrowing at the dog. "Nice mutt you got there," he sneered. "What's a fella like you doing living all alone in these woods?" Noah's instincts flared, sensing potential danger. However, something in the man's demeanor also spoke of desperation. With a measured breath, he said, "Hold on, wait here." He closed the door partway, leaving Daisy inside, and headed to the kitchen. From the fridge, he pulled out a loaf of bread and some cold cuts. He wasn't sure if compassion was wise or foolish, but he couldn't send the man away starving. He stepped back out, offering the food. "Here. There's a place about 3 miles down the highway that might give you a place to stay." The stranger tore into the bread hungrily, eyes darting suspiciously around the porch. After devouring half the sandwich in seconds, he coughed and said, "Thanks, guess." Then, abruptly, he straightened, tossing the remaining bread onto the porch. "But I need some money too," he demanded, voice turning aggressive. "I'm not walking nowhere without a couple bucks in my pocket." Noah felt his pulse spike. He was alone out here, with only Daisy and a phone that might or might not have reliable reception. The man was bigger than him, though unsteady on his feet. "I don't carry cash," Noah replied truthfully, "and I'm sorry, but you need to leave. Now." Instead of retreating, the man advanced, a wild look in his eyes. "You think you can just—" Suddenly, Daisy lunged, snarling from inside the cabin. She pushed the door open with her body, standing protectively at Noah's side. The sound of her bark reverberated through the night air, primal and fierce. The stranger froze, momentarily startled by the intensity of Daisy's stance. her teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from deep within her chest. If she had once been near death in the swamp, she showed no weakness now. She was defending her new home, her new friend, with every fibre of her being. Seeing that he was outmatched, the man muttered a curse under his breath and turned, stumbling off the porch. In seconds, he vanished into the night, swallowed by shadows. Daisy continued to bark until the sound of his footsteps faded. Noah's heart hammered. Gently, he placed a hand on Daisy's back, feeling the tension in her muscles. "Good girl," he whispered. "You protected me." She glanced up, her growl dissolving into a soft whine. It struck Noah how close that encounter had come to something more dangerous. He had always been self-reliant, never expecting to need protection in his own home. But Daisy's unwavering loyalty shone like a beacon in that tense moment. Together, they went inside, bolting the door behind them. The cabin felt both safer and more vulnerable than ever. Noah collapsed onto the couch, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Daisy jumped up beside him, resting her head on his lap. He scratched behind her ears, each stroke a silent expression of gratitude. "You saved me too," he murmured, voice trembling slightly. The notion that they had saved each other first from the swamp, now from this random nighttime threat, bound them tighter than ever. Over the following weeks, the bond between Noah and Daisy deepened. She accompanied him everywhere, trips to the grocery store, scenic drives to capture nature photographs, even short hikes on well-traveled trails. Whenever they passed the Okefenokee, Daisy would stiffen, letting out a low whine. But her trust in Noah seemed to override her fear. With every little victory, her tail wagged more confidently. Noah's photography gained new depth. He found himself capturing subtle details. He once overlooked the fleeting sparkle in a creature's eye, the dappled play of light on water, the silent dance of shadows. His clients noticed the change, praising the heightened emotional quality of his work. He attributed it all to Daisy, though he never explained that to them. Only he understood the shift inside him. Yet, life wasn't without its challenges. Strange dreams continued to plague Noah, watery depths, swirling currents, the echo of his father's voice. More than once, he woke up gasping, only to find Daisy watching, her muzzle resting on the edge of his bed. Each time, she would gently lick his hand, anchoring him back to reality. There were also logistic hurdles. Freelance photography often required travel, and though some assignments allowed him to bring Daisy, others did not. He had to balance his finances carefully, declining a few jobs that would require long absences. For the first time, he realized how deeply he wanted stability, not just for himself, but for the dog who depended on him. One evening, after a long day photographing a local festival, Noah sank into the recliner. Daisy curled up at his feet. The phone rang. Caller ID showed it was Lisa, his older sister, who lived in Atlanta. "Hey, little bro," she said brightly. "How's cabin life treating you?" He smiled. He hadn't spoken much to Lisa in recent months, too absorbed in his own world, but perhaps it was time to reconnect. "Better than you'd think," he said. "I, adopted a dog. No way." "You?" Her laughter was like a burst of sunshine. "That's amazing. Mum told me you'd found a dog in the swamp." "I guess it's serious then?" He nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Serious is the right word. She's changed things for me. I actually feel happy." "That's great to hear. You should come visit sometime." "Bring the dog. I miss you." A pang of longing coursed through him. "Yeah. Maybe soon," he said, knowing the city triggered memories too. He had grown up there before moving out to the cabin. But the idea of seeing family, letting them meet Daisy, felt like a step forward. "I'll think about it." A few nights later, as logs crackled in the fireplace, Noah found himself staring at the old photo of him and his father again. Daisy lay nearby, half asleep, the reflection of the fire dancing in her half-lidded eyes. He turned the photo over, noticing for the first time a handwritten date on the back, June 6, 2002. His father's handwriting was scrawled below it. First canoe trip with Noah in the Okefenokee. A wave of emotion swelled. How many times had he yearned to talk to his father, to ask how to navigate the complexities of adulthood? He realized Daisy had awakened and was now watching him, ears slightly drooping. "I wish he could see you," Noah whispered, stroking her fur. "He'd be proud we rescued each other." Her only response was to shuffle closer, resting her chin on his knee. But that simple gesture provided a degree of comfort he hadn't felt in years. Noah felt tears prick his eyes. He didn't stop them. Letting out the grief felt strangely liberating. Daisy remained motionless, her breathing steady and patient, as if giving him permission to shed the weight of his sorrow. In that moment, he felt the presence of his father in the room, not as a ghost, but as a warm memory. Perhaps the Okefenokee would always hold an element of tragedy for him, but Daisy's miraculous survival also revealed a new narrative of rescue, resilience, and the power of love. A few weeks later, a call came from the local ranger station. An acquaintance of Noah's from the conservation group knew he had a strong attachment to the swamp. They needed help locating a missing father and son who had ventured into a restricted part of the Okefenokee. Despite warnings, they had gone canoeing without a proper guide or equipment. Local authorities were already on the case, but they needed extra eyes, someone who knew the swamp's peripheries well and could help search. Noah hesitated. Part of him quaked at the thought of returning to the deeper sections where his father had once been lost. But Daisy's calm presence by his side gave him courage. By late afternoon, he arrived at the staging area, a boat launch near a heavily forested portion of the swamp. Rangers bustled about, conferring over maps, walkie-talkies crackling with static-laden messages. A young volunteer recognized Noah and waved him over. "We're splitting into small search parties," the volunteer said. "They've been gone for 12 hours now, and nightfall's coming." Noah's stomach clenched. He remembered all too well how quickly darkness could envelop the swamp, turning it into a maze-like trap. Daisy, on a leash, seemed alert, sniffing the breeze. He joined a group that included 2 park rangers. They took a flat-bottomed skiff, navigating winding channels lined with cypress trees and ghostly Spanish moss. The setting sun painted the water with shades of orange and red, intensifying the urgency. They called out names: Sam, Ryan, the father and son they were searching for. The only replies were echoes of their own voices and the shrill calls of distant birds. Soon, darkness draped over the swamp. They switched on powerful beams of flashlights, scanning the shoreline. Daisy, at the front of the skiff, sniffed the air, her ears pricked forward. For a moment she whined softly. Noah felt a pang of hope. "Cut the engine," he whispered. "Let's listen." In the hush, they heard a faint noise, a muffled voice, possibly a cry for help, carried across the still water. Carefully, they maneuvered toward the sound. The lights revealed a battered canoe, half submerged, pinned against the roots of a cypress by the slow current. A small figure waved an arm, the son, Ryan, no older than 10. He clung to the trunk of a fallen log, his father partially draped over the canoe, unconscious or immobile. Relief and fear tangled in Noah's chest. This was exactly the kind of situation that had claimed his own father. As they drew closer, one of the rangers jumped out, wading through chest-deep water to lift the father onto the skiff. The man was pale, with a gash on his forehead. Ryan sobbed, adrenaline and fear making him shake uncontrollably. Noah lifted the boy aboard, wrapping him in a blanket. Daisy whined, trying to nuzzle the boy's hand. Ryan clutched at Daisy, burying his face into her fur. Perhaps it was the first moment of comfort he'd felt in hours. Once the father was safely on board, they checked his vitals. Weak pulse, shallow breathing, but he was alive. As they revved the engine to head back, Noah felt tears sting his eyes. In some cosmic design, he was part of a rescue that mirrored the tragedy he'd once experienced, except this time, the outcome was different. This time, the father lived. Back at the staging area, paramedics rushed forward. Noah helped carry the father onto a waiting gurney, while Ryan clung to Daisy until a worried mother arrived, hugging her son with frantic relief. The boy looked up, tears streaking his dirt-smeared face, and said, "Thank you, mister, and thank you, doggy." Noah could only nod, emotion choking his words. Daisy gave a small wag of her tail, as if acknowledging the gratitude. Days later, Noah learned from the rangers that both the father and son recovered well. The father had suffered a severe concussion and mild hypothermia, but would be fine. Word of Noah's involvement spread through the local community, though he brushed off any notion of being a hero. His priority was Daisy's well-being. She too had been a brave participant, maintaining calm in a chaotic environment. Returning to the cabin one evening, he found fresh energy coursing through him. He felt unburdened. For years, the memory of his father's drowning had weighed him down. But saving this father and son somehow closed that loop of grief. It didn't erase the past, but it offered redemption. The swamp no longer held only sorrow. Sitting on the porch, Daisy curled at his feet. Noah watched a sunset fade into a tapestry of violet and gold. The shadows of the forest stretched across the yard, but they no longer looked menacing. They looked like guardians of a world where life and death coexisted in a delicate dance. "Thank you," he said quietly, scratching Daisy behind the ears. "You've given me a reason to see beauty again, to forgive the swamp, and maybe to forgive myself." She offered a gentle lick on his hand. With the next full moon, Noah found himself planning a trip to Atlanta. He had told Lisa he might visit, letting her and their mother meet Daisy. The notion of returning to the city, which he once fled to escape the pain, now felt strangely welcoming. He wasn't the same person who left, and Daisy would be by his side. On the morning of departure, he carefully packed the truck enough supplies for Daisy, along with some gifts for his family. Before locking up, he paused on the cabin's threshold, glancing at the cozy interior. He saw the framed photo of him and his father on a small table by the fireplace, a candle flickering beside it. In his mind, he heard his father's voice again, "Always respect the swamp. It has secrets, but it also has beauty." Now, he understood those words on a deeper level. The swamp was a realm where life tested you, forced you to confront your fears, and, if you were lucky, showed you the resilience beating in your heart. Daisy's rescue had set in motion a chain of events that led to personal healing, new bonds, and renewed purpose. Daisy barked once, as if urging him to move on. With a nod, Noah closed the cabin door, stepping forward into the next chapter of his life, knowing that while challenges would come, he was no longer alone. They had each other, bound by survival, strengthened by love, and guided by hope. Life seldom grants second chances, but sometimes a small spark of hope emerges from life's darkest corners, just like Daisy emerging from the swamp. This story reminds us that compassion and resilience can transform not only those we save, but also ourselves. It's a gentle nudge to look for the light within every shadow, to embrace the bonds that form in moments of profound vulnerability. If you found yourself moved by Daisy's story and Noah's journey, make sure to support this channel. Every like, share, and subscription helps spread tales of courage, heart, and healing to more people. By joining our growing community, you become part of a circle of compassion where stories bring us closer and hope guides us onward. So give a thumbs up, share with friends and family, and hit that subscribe button to keep uplifting stories alive in the world. Let's continue finding hope together.